The house key trembled in my hand as I stood before the front door. 3 days in the hospital had felt like 3 years, and all I wanted was to collapse into my own bed, surrounded by the familiar scent of home. The sunset stretched long shadows across the porch, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I turned the key slowly, not wanting to wake anyone if they were napping. The door creaked softly as it opened. I stepped inside, my hospital bag brushing against my leg. Something about the house felt different, warmer, livelier than when I'd left. From upstairs came the sound of voices, low, intimate, and then laughter, familiar and bright. My heart raced, but not with joy. The wooden stairs creaked beneath my steps, each one echoing through the silence like a countdown. When I reached the landing, I stopped. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow opening I saw shadows moving, intertwined figures cast upon the wall. I pushed the door open. That moment would haunt me for the rest of my life, yet it also marked the beginning of the most calculated revenge I would ever devise. 3 days earlier, the accident had happened, sudden and terrifying. One minute I was driving home from my book club meeting, thinking about the tapas I'd pick up for dinner. The next, I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and a pounding headache that made me nauseous. "Celeste," Dr. Gibson said, pulling a chair close, "you're very lucky. The drunk driver who hit you walked away unharmed, but you suffered a severe concussion and some internal injuries. We'll need to keep you under observation for maybe 3 or 4 days." I had never been away from home that long since our wedding 5 years ago. My husband, Adrian, was by my side when I woke up, holding my hand, whispering how terrified he'd been when he got the call. "I wouldn't know what to do if I lost you, Celeste," he said, his blue eyes shining with restrained tears. "You're everything to me." I squeezed his hand, warmth spreading through my chest. After 5 years of marriage and countless small arguments about dishes or taking out the trash, it was comforting to know he still loved me deeply. Adrian visited every day, bringing flowers, magazines, and updates about work. He was a financial advisor at a small downtown office, and clients adored him. He had a charm that made anyone feel like an old friend after just a few minutes. "How's Mrs. Monroe?" I asked on the second day, referring to the elderly client who'd practically become our honorary grandmother. "Oh, she's fine, keeps asking about you. She even wants to bring you her famous cookies." Then he added, a bit hesitantly, "The Stewarts are still handling their retirement fund, but don't worry about work, Celeste. Just focus on getting better." On the third day, my younger sister Lila came to visit. She lived 2 hours away and rushed over the moment she heard the news. Though our personalities were opposites, we'd always been close. I was cautious and calm, she was impulsive and blunt. "You look awful," she said, flopping into the chair. "Thanks. Exactly what every recovering patient wants to hear." She laughed and pulled a box of chocolates from her purse. "The best kind from downtown. I figured hospital food isn't exactly gourmet." We talked for hours. Lila told me about her latest disastrous date, a guy who showed up to coffee wearing a t-shirt that said "World's Most Okay Boyfriend." I laughed and told her about Mrs. Jenkins, our neighbor, who swore someone had been rummaging through her trash as part of a identity theft plot. "Or maybe she's just throwing away good stuff," Lila joked. "Remember when we found that vintage jewelry box in Mrs. Parker's garbage?" The laughter made my side ache. Lila immediately frowned. "You okay? Want me to call the nurse?" "I'm fine, just sore. The doctor said if my scans look good, I can go home tomorrow." "Great. Adrian must be thrilled you're coming back." Something in her tone made me look up. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. I just mean, guys left on their own usually live off cereal and takeout." She wasn't wrong. Adrian always joked he'd starve if left alone for more than a few days. That night, after Lila left for her hotel, I called Adrian to tell him I might be discharged a day early. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, this is Adrian Hartman. I can't take your call right now, please leave a message." I left one, then tried again an hour later, still no answer. Not unusual. He often forgot to charge his phone or left it in another room. But tonight, the silence felt heavier. Maybe it was the pain meds making me paranoid, or maybe the way he'd seemed distracted that morning. The next morning, Dr. Gibson entered with a smile. "Good news, Celeste. You're clear to go home. But take it easy, no driving or lifting anything heavy. If you feel dizzy or nauseous, call us immediately. I thanked him and packed my few belongings, eager to return home. The hospital had been kind, but nothing compared to my own bed. The taxi ride took about 20 minutes, winding through streets lined with orange trees and tidy gardens. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where neighbors waved and borrowed sugar from each other. Adrian and I had bought the 2-story house 3 years earlier, with its blue shutters and the garden I'd spent countless weekends tending. When the car stopped at the gate, I noticed Adrian's car wasn't there. He was probably at the office. That was fine, I wanted a few quiet hours alone before he came home. I paid the driver, climbed the steps slowly, pain pulsing through my ribs with every breath. The key felt heavy in my hand. It took me a moment to fit it into the lock. The instant I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air smelled faintly of vanilla candles, strange, since I'd never bought that kind. I preferred lavender or eucalyptus. And there was another scent, expensive, feminine perfume I didn't recognize. I set my bag down and listened. The house wasn't empty. From upstairs came soft voices, light, musical laughter from a woman, followed by a deeper, familiar chuckle, Adrian's. In that moment, everything inside me froze. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step sending a dull ache through my injured ribs. The voices drifted from our bedroom, and as I got closer, I caught snippets of conversation. Maybe we should get dressed soon, the woman said. We could call. Relax, Adrian replied, his tone lazy, satisfied. The bedroom door was slightly open, and through the crack I saw our bed, the one we'd picked out together. The bed where we'd made love on our wedding night. The bed where I'd cried on his shoulder when my father died last year. Adrian was there, his back to the door, and they were tangled together on our bed, intimate in a way I knew all too well, a rhythm that used to be ours. The woman's soft moan cut through me like shattered glass. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my marriage dissolve before my eyes. Her hand ran through Adrian's hair the way mine once did, whispering words I couldn't make out but felt in the way his body responded. This wasn't a drunken mistake or a moment of weakness. It was intimacy, familiar, practiced, the kind that comes from doing it many times before. How long had it been going on? The woman turned her head slightly, and for a moment I thought she'd seen me, but her eyes were closed, lost in pleasure. Adrian was too absorbed to notice anything else. I backed away, my legs trembling, heart hammering. I reached the top of the stairs before my knees gave out, and I had to clutch the railing to keep from collapsing. Everything I'd ever believed about my life, my marriage, Adrian shattered. The man who had held my hand in the hospital, who said he couldn't live without me, was in our bed with another woman. I needed to leave. I had to get out before they came downstairs, before I had to face the truth of what I'd just seen. But where could I go? My car was still in the shop after the accident, and I couldn't just call a taxi and explain I was fleeing my own home because my husband was cheating. I was trapped. The sensible thing would have been to storm back in, confront them both, scream, demand answers, cry out my pain in one explosive moment. But I didn't. Instead, I walked quietly down the stairs and slipped out the front door, closing it softly behind me. I made it to the end of the driveway and sat down on the curb, trembling. The warm sunset washed over my face. The neighborhood was calm. Mrs. Jenkins across the street was watering her flowers. Somewhere a lawnmower hummed. It was an ordinary day, except my world had just fallen apart. I sat there for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd seen and what it meant. My marriage was over, that much was clear, but a flood of questions swarmed my mind, making it impossible to focus on anything. Who was she? How did they meet? How long had it been going on? And cutting through every other question like a blade came the most painful one of all. What did she have that I didn't? I was still sitting on the curb. 10 minutes later, she appeared, kissed Adrian goodbye on the porch, then drove off. He stood there, watching her leave, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. He looked happy, happier than I'd ever seen him. I waited until he went back inside before standing up and brushing the dust off my jeans. My legs still trembled, and my ribs ached from sitting on the hard concrete, but strangely I felt calm. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than pain or confusion. I walked back, up the driveway and stepped into my own house. "Adrian," I called, forcing my voice to sound light. Casual. "I'm home." He appeared at the top of the stairs, and for a brief second, I saw a flicker of panic cross his face before he masked it with a smile. "Celeste, you're home early. I thought they'd keep you until tomorrow. The doctor said I could leave today." "Surprise?" I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack from the effort. He came down and hugged me, and I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming. He smelled like sex and perfume, and when he kissed my forehead, I could taste the lie on his lips. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice laced with fake concern, tired, yet cheerful to have me home. My reply was dripping with irony he didn't catch. "Do you want me to make something for dinner?" he offered. "Or should we grab takeout from that tapas place you love?" "Sounds perfect." I watched him open the takeout menu and listened as he told me about a client meeting that probably never happened, about how much he missed me while I was gone, about how excited he was to have me home. It was all theater and he was a skilled actor. We had dinner across from each other, chatting idly about my recovery and his work. He asked about Lila's visit. I told him about the chocolates and Mrs. Jenkins thinking someone was digging through her trash. "She's paranoid," he laughed. "Remember when she thought the mailman was reading her magazines?" Ah. Something flickered across his face, but he quickly composed himself. "I got you something while you were in the hospital, a welcome home gift." He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet set with my birthstone. "It's beautiful, you didn't have to. I was so scared when you had that accident, Celeste. It made me realize how much you mean to me. Under any other circumstance, I might have been touched. But now I just wondered whether he'd bought it before or after he started sleeping with her. Was this a gift born from love or guilt?" "Put it on me," I said, holding out my wrist. He clasped the bracelet gently, and for a fleeting moment, I almost forgot what I'd witnessed. That was the Adrian I had fallen in love with, the man who brought flowers for no reason, who remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. But maybe that man had never truly existed. Or maybe he'd disappeared long ago. That night, we slept together for the first time since the accident. He was gentle, careful with my injuries. If I hadn't known about the other woman, I might have called it one of our most romantic nights in months. But I knew. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word of love cut into me like another blade of betrayal. When he finally fell asleep beside me, his arm draped protectively over my waist, I stared at the ceiling, searching for a way out. I could confront him, demand answers, threaten divorce, force him to choose. But part of me knew it wouldn't be enough. He lied too easily, acted too well. No. If I ended this marriage, it would be on my terms. I'd find out everything about his affair and then destroy him in a way he'd never recover from. The next morning, Adrian left for work right on time, kissed me goodbye, and told me to call if I needed anything. I waited until his car disappeared down the street before getting up to make coffee. My first instinct was to tear through the house looking for proof of the affair, but I was smarter than that. If Adrian had managed to carry on this relationship for months without me suspecting a thing, he'd be careful enough not to leave obvious traces. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my notebook, and began listing everything I knew. The woman was young, mid-20s, maybe with copper-colored hair and an elegant sense of style. She had a basement key to my house, which meant this wasn't some fleeting fling. They were serious enough for him to give her access to the most private space we shared. She drove a red sedan, though I hadn't caught the license plate. More importantly, she'd been with Adrian while I was in the hospital. They had planned to spend the night together. That meant regular contact and comfort in each other's company. This wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I needed to know who she was, but I couldn't hire a private investigator without risking Adrian's suspicion. I had to be smart, gather information slowly, carefully. My first stop was Adrian's home office, a small room off the living room where he kept client files and paperwork. I'd always respected his privacy and rarely went in there, but desperate times called for bold action. His computer was password protected, But I knew Adrian, he was never creative with passwords. I signed into his computer and opened his emails. What I despair saw made my stomach drop. Our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me. His email looked clean, at least the main inbox. But when I checked his browser history, I found something interesting. Recently, he'd been visiting real estate websites, searching for apartments downtown. Was he planning to leave me or find a place for her? I dug deeper and found something worse. He'd been researching marital law, specifically asset division during divorce and whether infidelity affected spousal support. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the legal pages. Adrian wasn't just cheating, he was preparing to leave me and calculating the financial risks before he did it. I printed a few pages, tucked them inside a book, and cleared both the print history and browser memory. If he was quietly studying me through his research, then I could study him right back. But I needed more. I needed to know who she was and how they'd met. That afternoon, I called Adrian Hartman Financial Group. "Hi, Mrs. Collins, this is Celeste Hartman. How can I help you?" Mrs. Collins was Adrian's secretary, an older, kind woman who'd been with the firm for 15 years. She'd always been sweet to me at company events. "Hi, Mrs. Collins, this is Celeste Hartman. Is Adrian in?" "Oh, Celeste. How are you feeling?" Adrian told us about the accident. We were all so worried. "I'm doing better, thank you. Actually, I was thinking of surprising him with lunch, but I can't remember his schedule. Does he have any client meetings this afternoon?" "Let's see, he has an appointment with the Martin family at 2, but he's free around 3:30. "Perfect. He's been so busy while I was in the hospital. I know he hates it when I'm not around to help organize his calendar." Mrs. Collins chuckled. "You know, Adrian's still charming as ever. Though, to be honest, he's been a bit distracted lately. Actually, last week he took on a new thank you can use an interview client, a young woman starting her own business. She's been by the office a few times for consultations." My pulse quickened. "Oh, that's great. It's nice to see young people thinking about their financial futures." "Yes, she's lovely, very professional. I think her name was Victoria something." "Oh right, Victoria Langford. She just opened a boutique on King Street." Victoria Langford. Finally, I had a name. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. I'll see you soon." I hung up and immediately searched the name online. Langford Atelier had its own website, luxurious interiors, high-end product lines, silk scarves priced in the hundreds, designer handbags. The About page featured a photo of Victoria, the same woman I'd seen in my bedroom, standing in front of her store, smiling radiantly. Her bio described her as a young entrepreneur passionate about bringing luxury fashion to the local community. She was 26, a business graduate, and had opened her boutique 6 months ago. 6 months, the same time Adrian had started working late more often. I spent more than an hour digging up everything I could about Victoria Langford. Business licenses are public information, so I found her home address, a luxury apartment complex downtown with a concierge and valet. How could a 26-year-old shop owner possibly afford to live there? New businesses usually struggle in their first years, unless there was financial backing. The more I learned, the angrier I became. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was using him, leveraging his expertise to grow her business, using his connections to find clients, and possibly using his money to maintain that lavish lifestyle. Adrian wasn't only betraying me. He was being manipulated, turned into a stepping stone for her ambitions. But I realized, anger, when channeled correctly, can become a sharp weapon. That afternoon, I drove downtown and parked across from Langford Atelier. Through the large front window, I watched Victoria arrange clothes and help customers. She was even more striking in person, confident, gracious, someone who made people around her light up. I observed her for an hour, memorizing every gesture, every look, the way she interacted with people. She was smart, and I admitted to myself she knew how to control others. By 5 o'clock the shop closed. She left, and a few minutes later I saw the red sedan pull up. I tailed her through the heavy traffic. She didn't drive back to the upscale apartments. She went to a small cafe across town, the kind of place where students study or write poetry. Inside, she met a man I didn't recognize, older, about in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit. They sat in a corner and talked seriously, in a businesslike way. There were other men too. Was Adrian just one of many sugar daddies funding Victoria's lavish life? I pulled out my phone and took several clear photos of the two of them. I didn't know who the man was yet, but I had a hunch he would play an important role in the story I was piecing together. When Adrian came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen with dinner on the table. "Smells great," he said, loosening his tie. "Is there something special? Do I need a reason to cook for my husband?" He smiled and sat down opposite me. "How was your day? Resting like the doctor told you?" "For the most part. I drove out to the bookstore this afternoon." "You drove? The doctor said you weren't supposed to drive yet. What if you got dizzy on the road?" His concern sounded sincere, and for a moment I almost felt guilty for lying. But then I remembered Victoria Langford's hand in Adrian's hair and that guilt disappeared. "You're right, I'll be more careful. How about you? How was your day? Mrs. Collins said you had a new client this week, right?" His face changed for a split second so quickly I might have missed it if I weren't paying attention. "Yeah, a few new clients. Business has been picking up lately." "That's good. Anyone interesting?" "Not really. The usual people asking about retirement planning and investments. Nothing special." He lied so smoothly I almost had to admire his skill. If I hadn't known about Victoria, I might have believed him completely. "I've been thinking," I began carefully. "We've been married 5 years, but we've never really talked about the long-term future." "The future? What do you mean?" "Like children. Or buying a bigger house. The things couples usually think about." Adrian's fork froze midair. "Children? We already discussed this. I thought we agreed to wait until we were more financially stable. But your work is doing really well now. Celeste, I don't think now is the time for big decisions. You just got out of the hospital, focus on recovering. But when will it be the right time? We aren't getting any younger." He put down his fork and took my hand. "Let's talk about it in a few weeks, when you're fully recovered. In other words, we'll discuss this after I figure out how to divorce you without losing too much money." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Okay, you're probably right. But in my mind, I had already started calculating the next move." Over the next week, I developed a new routine. Every morning after Adrian left for work, I continued my investigation. I followed Victoria to the shop, to investor lunches, to her luxury apartment. I learned her schedule, habits, and weaknesses. The more I watched, the more questions I had. Victoria Langford lived far more lavishly than a small startup boutique owner should, even with Adrian's help. Her rent was at least $3,000 a month. The car was on a long-term lease, not owned. She wore different designer outfits every day and visited the city's most expensive salon twice a week. Either Adrian was spending far more than a financial advisor's salary would allow, or she had another source of money. The answer came on Thursday afternoon. I followed Victoria to one of the city's top fine dining restaurants. She met the older man I'd seen at the cafe, but this time they were more intimate. I sat at a table across the room, far enough not to be noticed. They held hands across the table, and when she got up to use the restroom, he kissed her hand. This wasn't a business meeting, this was a date. Victoria Langford wasn't just deceiving Adrian. She was betraying that older man as well. I took a few more photos to document their intimacy. From snippets of conversation I overheard, the man's name was Richard. He mentioned his wife several times, complaining about her spending and her suspicions about his business trips. When they left the restaurant, I quietly followed Richard to the parking lot and recorded the license plate. After a few hours of careful online searching, I uncovered his identity: Richard Hale, a well-known businessman who owned several car dealerships in the area. He had a wife, was extremely wealthy, and was funding Victoria's luxurious lifestyle while she was simultaneously involved with my husband. This web of lies was more complicated than I had imagined. I didn't yet know how I would use that information, but I had a strong feeling it would be crucial. That night I made a decision that would change everything. I called my sister. "Celeste, are you okay? I've been so worried about you. I need you to do me a favor. A big favor." "Of course. What do you need?" "I need you to help me catch Adrian cheating." There was a long silence on the other end. Celeste, what are you saying? I told Lila everything coming home early, what I saw in the bedroom, Victoria Langford, Richard Hale, and all of Adrian's lies. Oh my God, Celeste. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I want to destroy him. Do you mean confront him? Or expose him? Ah. Not like that. I want to be smart. I want enough evidence so that when we divorce, he can't deny it and loses everything he cares about. Lila was silent for a few seconds. That sounds serious. Are you sure you're thinking straight? Sister, I've never been more clear-headed than I am now. Adrian has lied to me about everything. Our marriage, our future, even our finances. I need to know the full extent of his betrayal before I act. So what do you need me to do? Help me break into his office after hours. I think there are documents on his work computer, client files, private emails he thinks are safe. Celeste, that's illegal. It's my husband's office. I have the right to know if he's using family money to support his mistress. After a pause, I added, he's supposedly going on a business trip to Chicago this weekend, at least that's what he said. It might be an excuse to meet Victoria, but either way he'll be gone for 2 days. Can you come down and help me Friday night? All right, I'll come. This is crazy, but you deserve to know the truth. I smiled faintly. Thank you, Lila. I love you. We'll handle this together. After hanging up, I felt calmer than I had in days. Having a plan and someone on my side made everything feel controllable again. Friday night, Adrian packed a small suitcase and kissed me goodbye. I'll call once I get to the hotel. Take care of yourself, okay? I'll be fine. Have fun at the conference. I love you, Celeste. He said it so naturally that for a moment, I almost believed him until the image of Victoria's hand on his body flashed through my mind, shattering the illusion. I love you too. 2 hours after he left, Lila arrived with a never present him bottle of wine and a worried look. I still think this is insane, she said, hugging me. But I'm here. We spent the evening reviewing the plan. Adrian's office building had basic security keycard access, and a guard who made rounds every few hours. But there were other small businesses in the same building, an accounting firm working late during tax season and a law office that often hosted evening clients. I still had Adrian's access card. He'd once given it to me in case of emergencies and never asked for it back. What if we get caught? Lila asked, pouring more wine. We won't. And even if we do, I'm his wife. I have legal rights over our finances. Do you though? Like really legal? I don't know. And I don't care. I need to know what he's hiding. At 10 p.m., we drove downtown toward Adrian's office. The parking lot was nearly empty, only a few cars left from people working late. Lila and I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, using Adrian's card to unlock the office suite. Hartman Financial Group was dark and silent. My heart pounded as I led Lila through the reception area, part fear, part adrenaline. Adrian's computer was locked, but I knew his password. Within minutes, I was in. And what I found was worse than I'd ever imagined. Adrian wasn't just cheating with Victoria Langford, he was embezzling client funds to finance her business. Evidence was everywhere, spreadsheets, bank statements. For the past 6 months, he'd been quietly siphoning small amounts from multiple client accounts, routing them through shell companies before they landed in Langford Atelier's accounts. Oh my God, Lila whispered behind me. How much money are we talking about? I did a quick calculation. At least $200,000. Maybe more. Celeste, this isn't just an affair anymore, this is a felony. He could go to prison for embezzlement. My hands shook as I printed the most incriminating documents. Adrian hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd betrayed his clients, people who trusted him with their life savings and retirement funds. Look at this, I said, pointing at a line on the spreadsheet. Mrs. Monroe, 78 years old. Adrian's been her advisor for 3 years, she completely trusts him. Lila leaned closer. He took $15,000 from her over 4 months, small enough that she wouldn't notice right away. I kept scrolling. The Stewarts lost $12,000, the Bowens $8,000. He had a system bleeding people dry, one transaction at a time. The scope of Adrian's crimes grew clearer by the minute, and with it came a cold, razor-sharp fury I hadn't known I was capable of. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore, it was about justice for everyone he'd hurt. "We have to copy everything," I said, plugging in a flash drive. "Every document, every email, every spreadsheet. What are you going to do with them?" "Make sure he pays for all of it." We worked for 2 hours, discussed growing with every file we opened. Adrian had been stealing for nearly a year, not 6 months, totaling close to $400,000. Some victims were barely getting by. But the biggest shock came when I opened the draft emails folder. There was one addressed to Victoria Langford, written 3 days earlier but never sent. I can't keep doing this. Celeste is getting suspicious, and the firm audit is scheduled for next month. We should move faster. The divorce papers are ready, and I've transferred most of our joint assets into the offshore account we discussed. If all goes well, we can disappear to the Bahamas by the end of the month. I love you. I stared at the screen, feeling my blood turn to ice. Adrian wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to rob me blind and flee the country with Victoria. "Lila, look at this." She leaned in, her face pale. "Celeste, you have to call the police right now." "Not yet. I need more evidence. And I need to make sure Victoria can't run before I expose them both. This is dangerous. What if they find out?" "They won't. Adrian still thinks I'm the obedient wife who suspects nothing. He has no idea I know everything." I copied the email and several other documents detailing their plan. They'd been communicating through a secret shared account, mapping out every step of their escape. Victoria wasn't just a gold digger, she was an accomplice fully aware of the embezzlement and helping Adrian cover it up. When we left the office, I had enough evidence to destroy them both, but I wasn't going to the police yet. I wanted to strike first. "So what's the plan now?" Lila asked as we drove home. I looked at her, a faint smile forming. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want." "What do you mean?" I turned to her, and the look in my eyes made her shiver. "I'm going to help them disappear." Sunday night, Adrian returned from his conference with a forced smile and a small gift, a bottle of expensive perfume I was sure Victoria had helped him choose. "How was the conference?" I asked, accepting his kiss and forcing myself not to recoil. "Boring. Just endless talks about new tax regulations and investment strategies." But I picked up a few things that could help clients. Clients, the very people he'd stolen from. "I missed you," he said, wrapping his arms around me. "The hotel was nice, but nothing beats sleeping next to you." "I missed you too." The lie slipped from my mouth effortlessly. I was becoming as good an actress as he was. A few days later, I began to act. Step 1: build my own financial safety net. I opened a new account at a different bank under my maiden name, using my old birth certificate and pre-marriage documents. I transferred a small amount from our joint account, enough to protect myself, but not enough for Adrian to notice. Step 2: gather more proof of Victoria's other affairs. On Tuesday, I followed her to another lunch with Richard Hale, this time fully prepared. I borrowed Lila's camera with a zoom lens and captured dozens of photos of them together, hand in hand, gazing at each other like infatuated lovers. But the most important moment came when they left the restaurant and walked into a nearby hotel. I sat in the lobby pretending to read a magazine for 2 hours until they came back down. Richard kissed her goodbye and handed her an envelope before leaving. I followed Victoria to her car. From a distance, I could see the envelope stuffed with cash. Richard wasn't just a lover, he was paying her. That night, I uncovered something that changed everything again. Adrian claimed he was working late, so I used the opportunity to dig deeper into Victoria's past. I had been too focused on the present and forgotten the past, and what I found stunned me. Victoria Langford wasn't her real name. She was born in California as Victoria Lane, with a criminal record including 3 counts of fraud and identity theft, convicted once and given probation. She'd moved to our area 2 years ago, right after legally changing her name to Victoria Langford. Langford Atelier wasn't her first business, she'd opened several others before, all of which collapsed under suspicious circumstances. Victoria was a professional con artist, and Adrian was merely her newest victim. But this was the most thrilling part of the plan. Victoria had no idea that I already knew everything. She thought she was playing a clever double game, milking Adrian for money while also squeezing Richard, keeping the two men separate and manipulating them both. She had no idea I was about to make them face each other. On Wednesday evening, I called Richard Hale's office. "Hello, Hale Auto Group, this is Laura. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm calling about Mr. Hale's appointment tomorrow. I'm from Langford Atelier and need to reschedule a bit. Let me check his calendar. I don't see any appointments with that store." Perfect. That meant Victoria was keeping her meetings with Richard secret from his staff, proof of how careful they were being about their affair. "Oh, sorry, it might be a personal meeting. Could you give me his direct number? I'll call him myself." "I'm sorry, I can't share his personal contact, but I can take a message if you'd like." "No need, thank you. I'll find another way." I hung up and immediately called Adrian's office. "Hartman Financial Group, this is Mrs. Collins." "Hi, Mrs. Collins, it's Celeste. Is Adrian there?" "He's with a client right now. Would you like me to leave a message?" "Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something. I'm planning a surprise birthday party for Adrian next month and want to invite some of his new clients. You mentioned a female client who owns a boutique, right? I thought it might be fun to include her." "Oh, you must mean Victoria Langford. What a sweet idea. She's lovely, she'd be delighted to meet Adrian's wife. Let me get you her contact info." Mrs. Collins read me Victoria's phone number and email information I already had. But the most important part was her confirmation that Victoria often came to Adrian's office for financial consultations. Every piece of my revenge plan was falling into place. Thursday afternoon, I made 2 calls that would set the entire plan in motion. The first was to Richard Hale. I'd gotten his private number by calling one of his dealerships and pretending to be a customer asking about a warranty. "Hello, this is Richard. Mr. Hale, this is Celeste Hartman. I believe you know my husband Adrian Hartman." There was a long pause. "I don't know anyone by that name." "That's strange because you're sharing the same mistress, Victoria Langford." This time, the silence was even longer. "You've got the wrong number." "I don't think so. Victoria Langford, or rather, Victoria Lane. Copper hair, green eyes, drives a red sedan. Owner of Langford Atelier on King Street. But you already know that, don't you? You're the one funding her." Richard's voice turned cold, threatening. "What do you want?" "I want to meet you. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Elm Street Cafe. Come alone." "Why should I?" "Because if you don't, I'll call your wife and tell her all about those afternoons at the hotel. I have pictures, Mr. Hale, very clear ones." He hung up without another word, but I knew he'd come. The second call was to Adrian. "Celeste, is something wrong?" "I'm fine, but there's something important we need to talk about. Can you come home early today?" "What's going on? You sound worried." "Come home and I'll tell you." "It's about us." His voice trembled slightly as he agreed to leave the office right away. 20 minutes later, Adrian walked through the door, his face tense with concern. "What's wrong, Celeste?" "You scared me." I sat in the armchair facing the door, the sunset casting shadows behind me so my face was hidden in the dark. "I know everything, Adrian." "No. What?" "About Victoria Langford. About the money you stole from your clients. About your plan to flee the country." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Celeste, let me explain." "No. There's no explanation that makes this acceptable." He collapsed onto the sofa, hands shaking. "How long have you known?" "Since the day I came home from the hospital. I saw you two in our bed." Adrian buried his face in his hands. "Oh God, Celeste. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "Which part? The affair or the embezzlement?" He looked up. "You know about the clients?" "I know everything. The offshore account, the fake identity, the house in the Bahamas. All of it." He stared at me like I was a stranger. "What are you going to do?" "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, my voice calm but icy. "I'm giving you 2 options. 1. Turn yourself in, confess, repay what you stole, and face the consequences like a man. Or 2. Stick to your plan, run off to the Bahamas with Victoria and pray I never find you." He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." I slid a large envelope across the table. But if you choose the second option, you should know something. Victoria Langford isn't who you think she is. Her real name is Victoria Lane. She has a criminal record and she's been conning at least one other man. Richard Hale, married, wealthy, and utterly obsessed with her. Adrian opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were copies of Victoria's criminal record, photos of her with Richard, and bank statements showing multiple deposits. She's been using you, Adrian. Just like she's using Richard. You're not special to her, you're just another mark on her list. He stared at the photos, his expression shifting from shock to pain to denial. That can't be true. She loves me. We're building a new life together. A life built on stolen money and with a professional con artist who'll vanish the moment she finds a better target. You're lying. Then call her. Tell her you want to speed things up, leave this weekend instead of next month. See how fast she comes up with an excuse. Adrian's hands shook as he dialed and put the call on speaker. Adrian, are you okay? You sound strange. I need to see you tonight. It's important. Tonight's impossible, darling. I have dinner with an investor. Then tomorrow. I think we should leave for the Bahamas this weekend, no point waiting until next month. Silence stretched. Adrian, we've talked about this. It has to be the right timing. We can't rush and risk mistakes. But I love you. Don't you want to start our new life together? Of course I do. Then be patient. I can't talk more now. I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up. Adrian stared at the phone, then looked at me and the photos scattered on the table. She's with him right now, isn't she? Most likely. Thursday nights are her usual business dinners with Richard. Adrian sat in silence for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, full of despair. What do you want from me, Celeste? I want you to choose. Prison or the Bahamas. Either way, this marriage is over. And if you choose the Bahamas, you'd better hope Victoria doesn't decide Richard's the better option, because when she leaves you stranded in a foreign country with no money and no way home, you'll be completely alone. Adrian broke down, silent tears streaming down his face. How did it come to this? Because you made every wrong choice, Adrian. And now you have to live with the consequences. I stood and walked toward the door. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Pack your things, but don't touch our joint accounts. I've already moved the money. Where are you going? To Lila's. When I come back, you'd better be gone. If you choose to turn yourself in, leave the lawyer's name. If you choose to run, leave nothing behind. Celeste, wait. I turned back to look at him one last time. I loved you once, Adrian. Truly. But the man I loved. He never really existed, did he? He didn't answer. And I didn't need to hear one. I drove to the hotel where Lila was staying and spent the night there, reviewing my plan one final time. Everything had to happen in exact order, one mistake, and it would all collapse. The next afternoon, at exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into the cafe on Elm Street. Richard Hale was already seated in the corner, looking uneasy. He was older than I expected, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, dressed elegantly but unable to hide the beginnings of a paunch. Richard eyed me with a mix of curiosity and irritation. You must be Celeste Hartman. Yes, thank you for coming. I sat across from him, studying his face, the polished, confident type of man used to getting whatever he wanted. All right, let's get to it. What do you want? I want to show you something. I slid my tablet across the table and played the recording I'd made the night before the phone call between Adrian and Victoria, where she rejected his suggestion to leave early for the Bahamas. Richard listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Where did you get this? I recorded it last night while she was having dinner with you. That's impossible. Victoria doesn't even know your husband. I opened my folder and pulled out the printed bank statements. Your mistress has been receiving money from my husband for over a year. He's been embezzling from his clients to fund her business. Richard flipped through the pages, his face growing darker with each one. How much? Nearly $500,000. And that's just what I've found. He muttered a curse under his breath, then looked at me. What were they planning to do with the money? Run away to the Bahamas and start a new life? Richard froze. When? Originally next month, but last night Adrian tried to move things up. Victoria said she was busy having dinner with an investor. That investor was you. I know. He fell silent for a long while before finally asking, "What do you want from me?" "I want to know how much you've given her." Richard hesitated, clearly weighing whether to tell the truth. "About 80, maybe $90,000, over 6 months. I did the math quickly. Between him and Adrian, Victoria had drained almost $600,000 in a year. "She's good," I said coldly. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Richard leaned back in his chair. "What do you have in mind?" "I think Victoria Langford needs to learn what betrayal feels like." "I'm listening." I pulled out my phone and opened the draft email Adrian had once written to Victoria, the one outlining their plan to run away together. Adrian thinks they're leaving together. Victoria thinks she's controlling them both. But what happens if neither of them has anything left? Richard narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "If Victoria suddenly finds both her sources of money gone, she'll panic. And when she panics, she'll make mistakes and show her true face to people far less forgiving than us." I explained the full plan in detail. When I finished, Richard smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "You're more ruthless than I expected, Mrs. Hartman. Call me Celeste. And you haven't seen anything yet." We stayed another hour, finalizing every detail. Richard would call Victoria, tell her he wanted to leave his wife and take her away immediately, promising to double her payout if she agreed to disappear with him that weekend. At the same time, I would arrange for Adrian to discover Victoria's relationship with Richard, not from me, but from an anonymous source, so he'd catch them himself. The plan was simple. Trap Victoria between two furious men, both realizing they'd been played. "And what about the money she's already taken?" Richard asked. "That's the best part." I laid out the second half of the plan, and his grin widened. "Are you sure this will work?" "It will. The only question is, do you have the guts to go through with it?" Richard thought for a moment, then nodded. "She took $90,000 from me and made me a fool. I want her to pay. She will for everything." That night I went home. Adrian's car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was eerily quiet. For a second, I wondered, had he chosen the Bahamas? But when I walked into the kitchen, I saw a note on the table. "Celeste, I'm choosing prison. I've called the police and confessed to everything. I've also contacted my lawyer William Carter, from Carter and Associates. I'm sorry for what I did to you, and to my clients. You deserve someone better than me. Adrian." I sat down and read the letter 3 times. A small part of me respected him for turning himself in, but the anger over how late it came quickly drowned that out. That night, the local news ran the story. Local financial advisor arrested for embezzling nearly $500,000. Adrian's booking photo flashed on the screen. My phone buzzed nonstop, neighbors, reporters, friends, all wanting a statement from the betrayed wife. I turned the phone off and poured myself a glass of wine. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Adrian was out of the game, which meant Victoria Langford had just lost her biggest source of income. But I wasn't stopping there. Saturday morning, I called her boutique. "Langford Atelier, this is Victoria. How can I help you?" "Hello, this is Celeste Hartman, Adrian's wife." The line went silent for nearly 30 seconds. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know about the affair, the money, and your little plan to run off to the Bahamas." "Mrs. Hartman, there must be some mistake. The only mistake here is yours. You thought you could steal my husband, steal his clients' money, and vanish without anyone fighting back. I don't know what Adrian told you. He didn't tell me a thing. I found out myself. And now Adrian's in jail, which means you've lost your main source of cash flow." Victoria was silent for a long time before finally whispering, "What do you want?" "To meet you. 2 p.m. today at your store." "I don't think that's a good idea. You don't have a choice. If you don't show up, my next call will be to Richard Hale's wife." Another long silence. "How do you know about Richard?" "I know everything, Victoria." I heard a sharp gasp on the other end, followed by a shaky breath. 2 o'clock. Don't make me wait. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into Langford Atelier. Victoria was behind the counter, looking wrecked. Her usually flawless makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, her hands trembling. "Close the shop," I said. "What?" "Flip the sign to closed and lock the door. I want privacy." She obeyed, moving slowly, nervously. When she turned back around, her eyes were red and swollen. "Sit down." Victoria perched on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt at any moment. "Let's begin. How long have you been involved with my husband?" "Mrs. Hartman, I don't think." "Answer." 8 months. "And how long have you been taking money from him?" "I didn't ask for it. He offered to help the business." "How long, Victoria?" 6 months. "And Richard Hale?" Her face crumbled. How do you know about Richard?" "I know everything. Your real name, your record, how you played 2 men at once just to drain them dry." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that. You're a con artist, a predator who preys on successful men, make men fall for you, then drain them dry. The difference this time is one of them used stolen money to fund you." Victoria burst into tears, her mascara streaking down her face. "I didn't know Adrian was embezzling, I swear." "But you still took the money, didn't you?" She said nothing, her silence louder than any confession. "Here's how this will go," I said coldly. "You'll return every dollar you took from Adrian and Richard. Every single dollar." "I don't have that kind of money. This shop barely covers its expenses." "Then find a way. If you don't, I'll make sure the whole world knows who you really are." I pulled out a large envelope and set it on the table between us. "In here are copies of your criminal record, bank statements, photos of you with both men, and a recording proving you knew about Adrian's embezzlement. I also have contact information for Richard's wife, Adrian's clients, the district attorney's office, and a few reporters who love a good scandal." Victoria stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "What do you want?" "I want you gone. Shut down the shop, pay the money back, and leave this city. If I ever see you again, or if you contact Adrian or Richard, I'll destroy you." "I can't. I have a lease, employees, customers. You should have thought about that before becoming a criminal." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You have 72 hours. After that, I can't promise anything." "Wait," she shouted behind me. "Even if I wanted to pay it back, I can't. Langford Atelier is losing money, and Richard's wife has been watching his accounts like a hawk." "Sounds like a personal problem." I left her sitting there, a defeated woman surrounded by piles of luxury clothing bought with other people's money. But my revenge wasn't over yet. Sunday night, the phone rang. A trembling voice on the other end said, "Celeste, please, I need more time. 72 hours isn't enough. You had months to plan your little escape with Adrian." "Victoria, I'm sure you're smart enough to figure your way out of this." "I'll lose everything. Her store, her apartment, her car. She'd lose it all, wouldn't she?" "Oh, she meant everything she bought with stolen money." "How tragic. Please, there has to be another way. We can negotiate, set up a payment plan. The only plan I care about is the one where you disappear completely." I hung up and turned off my phone. I had no intention of giving Victoria more time or mercy. I just wanted her to spend the next few days drowning in fear while I prepared the final stage of my revenge. Monday morning, I drove to Richard Hale's main dealership. The showroom was impressive rows of gleaming cars under bright lights, salesmen in suits ready to close deals. I asked to see Richard, and after a short wait, they led me to his office on the second floor. "Celeste," he said, standing from behind his large desk. "How did things go with Victoria?" "Exactly as expected. She's scared and desperate. Which means she's about to make the stupidest decisions of her life." "What kind of decisions?" I sat across from him and pulled out my phone. "The kind that give us the upper hand to end this for good." I showed Richard the string of messages I'd received from Victoria over the past 24 hours. She'd gone through every emotional stage: defiance, pleading, rage, and finally panic, realizing she was cornered. "She's going to run," Richard said after reading them. "Exactly. But she can't run without money. And to get money, she'll have to get reckless, steal, scam, or con someone. Victoria has a criminal record. When she's desperate, she always returns to what she does best." Richard leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And when she does, we'll be ready." I laid out the final stage of the plan for him. When I finished, Richard laughed out loud. "You're truly ruthless, Mrs. Hartman. I prefer to call it precise and decisive." That afternoon, I called Detective Lisa Roberts from the Charleston Bureau of Investigation, a woman I'd researched thoroughly. She was known for being tough, sharp, and relentless in financial crime cases. "Detective Roberts, this is Celeste Hartman, the wife of the financial advisor who was arrested for embezzlement last week. I remember that case. How can I help you?" "I have information on someone who may be connected to my husband's crimes and who's possibly planning to commit another." I gave her Victoria's real name, her criminal history, and the evidence I'd collected, carefully edited to exclude any mention of Richard or my involvement. "We'll look into it," Detective Roberts promised. "Thank you. One more thing. I believe Victoria is planning to flee the city within a few days. If you intend to question her, it would be best to act quickly. We'll take note of that." Tuesday morning, I drove past Langford Atelier and saw a large sign, "Everything must go, store closing." I parked across the street and watched for 2 hours. Victoria was busy marking down prices, packing boxes, looking exhausted and desperate, like a woman with nowhere left to run. By noon, Richard's Mercedes pulled up out front. He walked in, and I saw Victoria's face light up with fragile hope through the glass. They talked for about 20 minutes, tension thick in the air. Richard was calm. Victoria cried and begged. When he finally left, she collapsed against the counter, nearly fainting. Phase 3 of the plan had begun. That evening, my phone rang again. "Celeste, it's Victoria. I need to talk. I thought I made myself clear on Sunday. You have 1 day left. I met with Richard today. He told me you and he are working together. He told me everything about the photos, the investigation, the plan to ruin me. I want to negotiate. I'm not interested in doing business with criminals, Victoria. What if I said I have more money?" I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I have about $200,000 money I kept hidden. No one knows about it, not Adrian or Richard. It's split between a safe, an offshore account, and my apartment. And what do you plan to do with it?" "Give it to you. In exchange, you end the investigation and let me leave quietly." I thought for a few seconds. $200,000 could help cover some of Adrian's clients' losses and leave Victoria penniless. But it still wasn't enough. Not enough to pay for what she'd done. "No deal, Victoria. Celeste, please. I'm trying to cooperate. You destroyed my marriage, helped my husband steal from innocent people, and conned dozens of others. $200,000 means nothing. Then what do you want?" "I want you to pay for everything." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you'd better find yourself a good lawyer, Victoria. You're going to need one." I hung up and immediately called Detective Lisa Roberts back. "This is Celeste Hartman. I have an update on Victoria." "What kind of update?" "She just admitted to committing multiple financial frauds and hiding victims' money. I think your team should pay her a visit soon before she skips town. That's quite a coincidence, we were already planning to see her tomorrow morning." "Perfect." She mentioned hiding the money in several places: her apartment, a safe, and offshore accounts. "You'll want to check them all." "We will." Wednesday morning, I sat in my car across the street from Victoria's building, holding a cup of coffee and a newspaper. Right at 9 a.m., 3 unmarked police cars pulled up. I watched Detective Roberts and several officers go inside. 20 minutes later, they came out, escorting Victoria in handcuffs. She looked small and exhausted, her eyes hollow. As they led her to the car, she glanced around in desperation, and in that moment, our eyes met. I lifted my coffee cup and gave her a small nod. The expression on her face was exactly what I'd hoped for: shock, confusion, pain, and the dawning realization that she'd been completely defeated by the woman she once looked down on. The police cars drove away. I sat there a few more minutes, savoring the taste of victory in my coffee. Victoria was finally facing justice. No money, no allies, no manipulation left to save her. But I still had one last thing to do. That afternoon, I met Richard Hale one final time at the same cafe where we had first planned everything. "I saw the news," he said as he sat down across from me. "She's been charged with financial fraud, identity theft, money laundering, the whole list. She deserves it. And the money she mentioned, the police found it. Over $230,000 hidden in accounts and safes. It'll all go toward compensating the victims. Richard nodded approvingly. Adrian's clients would recover most of their money from what Victoria had stashed away, and the assets Adrian surrendered in his plea deal. Not everything, but enough for most of them to rebuild. And what do we get out of all this? Richard asked. I studied his face carefully. He had been helpful during the investigation and was also one of Victoria's victims, but I hadn't forgotten that he was a married man who'd had an affair and used his family's money to fund his mistress. You'll go back to your wife, and she'll never know about Victoria. I'd say that's worth about $90,000, wouldn't you agree? The smile on Richard's face faltered slightly. And if I don't agree? Then you'd be making a very bad decision. Your wife seems like a lovely woman. She deserves a better husband, not one who cheats with a convicted felon. Richard was silent for a long moment, then chuckled softly and shook his head. You're remarkable, Celeste Hartman. I'd prefer the term meticulous. We parted ways after that, and I never saw Richard Hale again. A year later, I happened to read a social column. Richard Hale and his wife renew their wedding vows at a resort in Maui, Hawaii. Did that mean he'd truly changed or just learned to hide better? I didn't know and I didn't care. For me, that chapter was over. 6 months after Victoria's arrest, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers from Adrian. He'd been sentenced to 7 years in prison for embezzlement, and though he had sent me many letters from jail, I returned them all unopened. The sale of the house will close next week, my lawyer said, sliding a folder toward me. After legal fees and restitution, you'll have about $200,000 clean. Good. Half of it goes into a trust fund for Adrian's victims who weren't fully compensated. The other half goes into my New Beginnings Fund. New Beginnings Fund? He asked with a smile. Yes. I'm moving to New York. New city, new work, new life. After everything, I think I've earned a fresh start. The lawyer nodded and jotted it down. And your husband's letters? He's still sending them regularly. Send them all back. I have nothing left to say to Adrian Hartman. 3 weeks later, I stood in the living room of my new Manhattan apartment, gazing at the brilliant skyline. The view was breathtaking, skyscrapers glowing in the sunset, and below, the endless hum of a city that never slept. A new world, where I could begin again. My phone buzzed a message from Lila. I just saw the news. Months later, the court sentenced Victoria to 12 years in prison. You must feel relieved. And I did. Victoria had been convicted of multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, money laundering. The judge had been especially harsh, considering her prior record and the number of victims she'd harmed. But more than relief, I felt vindicated. I had sworn that everyone who hurt me would face consequences, and I had succeeded beyond my own expectations. Adrian was in prison, his reputation destroyed, his license permanently revoked. Victoria was serving a long sentence in federal prison, her days of deceit finally over. Even Richard Hale had paid his price, not through the law, but through the fear of realizing how close he'd come to losing everything. I had made sure each of them got exactly what they deserved. While unpacking the last boxes, I found an old photo wedged at the bottom, a wedding picture of Adrian and me. We looked so young, radiant, full of hope. For a moment I felt a pang of pity for that girl in the picture, so naive, so trusting, so unaware of what was waiting ahead. But that woman no longer existed. She had been replaced by a stronger, wiser, and far more dangerous Celeste, someone who knew that trust was a luxury, and that justice sometimes had to be taken, not awaited. I looked at the photo one last time, then dropped it into the trash. The past was closed. It was time to build the future. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine, sat on my new balcony, and watched the sunset fade over the Hudson River. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen, expecting Lila or a new coworker, but it wasn't. It was an unknown number. Hello, is this Celeste Hartman? This is she. Who's calling? I'm Detective Sarah Ellison with the New York Police Department. I'm calling about a case I think you'll find interesting. What kind of case? A financial fraud. The suspect's a woman who targets married men, earns their trust, then drains their money. Very sophisticated methods. A familiar thrill ran through me, tingling in every nerve. And what does that have to do with me? We know you played a crucial role in solving a similar case in Charleston. We could really use your insight and your particular skills. I paused, thinking. I'd planned to find a quiet job in New York, maybe work with a financial victims fund, or open a small boutique, live a peaceful, ordinary life. But the detective was right. Now I had a set of very specific skills forged from pain and perfected through experience. Skills that could be useful for justice. Tell me more about the case, I said. As Detective Sarah Ellison went over the details, I began taking notes, asking questions. Every word she said felt familiar. Too familiar to be a coincidence. Detective, I said when she finished, what's the suspect's name? We're not certain. She's used multiple identities. But one confirmed alias is Veronica Lang, a known associate of Victoria Lane. Victoria is already serving time. This appears to be a connected ring. I nearly dropped my phone. Detective Ellison, I said slowly, we need to meet in person. I have very important information about this case. How soon can you be at the precinct? I looked out the window, where the Manhattan lights shimmered against the night sky. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about the future. 20 minutes, I replied. I understood one thing. Some people never change. They just move to another city and find new victims. But this time, Victoria made her biggest mistake. She chose New York, my city. And I was very good at hunting hunters. I grabbed my keys, walked to the door, and smiled. My new life had just begun and it was going to be thrilling. After all, Victoria had taught me one valuable lesson during our last encounter. Revenge isn't just about payback, it's about making sure the lesson sticks. And some lessons have to be taught more than once to truly sink in. I closed the apartment door behind me and stepped into the New York night, ready for the next chapter of my life. In the end, perhaps the most important thing I learned was this. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a verdict, but from the growth within your own heart. I was no longer the woman who fell apart when her trust was betrayed. I was the woman who stood up, who learned to protect herself and others from the same pain. Life can take many things from us: love, honor, trust, but if we hold on to clarity and courage, we can always find ourselves again. And what about you? Have you ever faced someone who made you realize that trust is a gift that shouldn't be given to the wrong person? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to join me on this journey through stories of trust, justice, and rediscovering ourselves after the scars, make sure to follow, because every story holds a lesson, and every ending is a new beginning.